Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Mandy stared at the well-dressed man standing in front of her, his words echoing in her head. "Amanda Black, you've been served," he said with a slight sadness. There was a dead silence in the office, and for a moment Mandy felt as if time had stopped. In her hand was the death sentence of a 5-year marriage. With a soft sob, she sank into a chair, clutching the papers. Slowly, the office began to come to its senses. The stares, whispers, and disapproving stares began to grow. Suddenly, Mandy heard her friend's soft voice next to her. "Mandy, come on," Kit said softly, taking her friend's hand and setting her on her feet. "Let's take you to the conference room, away from this spotlight." A black-haired 30-year-old woman took her friend away from her colleagues who were staring at her. Those who witnessed the show noted how Mandy turned from a noisy, flirtatious, cheerful blonde into a battered woman in just a few minutes. Some saw it as irony or humor, others as pity. Most already suspected the reason for the divorce. "How? I don't understand," Mandy stammered. "Things have just started to change for the better." She hugged herself, as if hugging gave her more strength. Kit hugged her, trying to calm her friend down. "I do not know, girl," Kit said softly. "Were there any hints that this would happen?" "Just the opposite," she gasped, "as if we were newlyweds again." "I decided that he was making up for lost time spent abroad." Kit only flinched slightly, but Mandy noticed it. Mandy mentally replayed the last 4 months of her marriage in her head. Since Eric returned home from Afghanistan, their bed life has been incredible. It was even better than after his return from Iraq 2.5 years ago. He was so passionate and sensual. "Oh my God," she thought. "Most of the time I can barely walk after that." She smiled sadly, wiping a tear from her eyes. "It was so hot and exciting. I mean, after I got back from that business trip last week," Mandy's smile warmed up a little. "Oh my God, Keith, Eric just wore me out. We did this so often that in the end I begged him to stop." Mandy's smile disappeared as she looked at her friend's questioning face. "No, nothing happened when I was on that trip. I told you it was over," she said. Kit nodded but didn't smile. "When was the last time Eric just hugged you or just kissed and touched you? Honey, when was the last time he made gentle love to you?" She sat in a daze, looking at Kit questioningly. With a determined sigh, Kit looked at her friend before continuing. "Mandy," she asked bluntly, "did he make love to you?" Mandy covered her face with her hands and sobbed deeply. But why? Why did he do that? She thought about it, and then suddenly froze. No, he couldn't have known, could he? Slowly raising her head, she was horrified. "Oh my God, Kit," she whispered. "He knows. Oh God, please no, please no." Tears filled Kit's eyes as she hugged her crying friend. She knew Eric pretty well, and if he really knew, then it was terrible. Eric nodded, listening on his cell phone. "Thank you, sir," he finally said when he heard that packages with photographs and legal documents had been delivered to his wife. After hanging up, he turned his attention to the laptop. With a simple click, he launched a process that would forever change the life of his unfaithful wife. She'll remember it for the rest of her life, he thought, picking up the phone and dialing a number. "Hello, this is the personnel department." A pleasant young voice rang out. "How can I help you?" "Mr. Davis, please," Eric said coldly. "This is Eric Black." "Oh, Mr. Black," the girl said quickly. "Let me transfer you." A few seconds later, Eric was talking to an unsmiling man. The conversation was short. Neither of them raised their voices, but the hostility did not go unnoticed. After finishing the conversation, Eric took a deep breath. Looking at the phone, he saw that his wife had already called him 5 times. Not yet, he thought, trying to calm down. Not yet. There was a sharp knock on the door of the conference room. When Kit opened it, she immediately recognized the 3 people standing in front of her. The first was a well-dressed elderly man named Simon Samuels, the vice president and head of their branch. Behind him stood the imposing John Davis, the head of human resources. Kit couldn't help but notice that Mr. Davis's face was bright red, and she could have sworn she saw the heat coming from his face. Behind them stood Anna Prescott, the office manager and boss of Mandy and Kit. "Miss Garnett, we need to talk to Miss Black," Mr. Samuels said grimly. "Thank you for your help, but please go back to your desk." The 3 of them entered the room, and Kit left, carefully closing the door behind her. "Miss Black, we have a problem," Samuels began. Mandy quickly stepped out into the parking lot, trying not to stumble. She was holding tightly the manila envelope that Mr. Davis had given her. There were photos inside, horrible photos of her and Sean Thompson, the business manager from the third floor. Mr. Davis briefly recounted his conversation with Eric. Eric threatened to make public the fact that the company had failed to comply with the code of conduct. He told Mr. Davis that he would discuss this with his future ex-wife at home before deciding whether to take any legal action. Mr. Davis informed her that they would meet with Sean next time, but that she should go home and talk to her husband before this all gets out of hand. He also informed her that they would all sit down with her and discuss her future at the company tomorrow, after she met with her husband. Mandy had a hard time finding her car because she was still crying a lot. The bright sunlight reflected off the cars, making them a little more difficult to identify. However, her car wasn't that hard to find. The big black Hyundai Santa Fe was not so easy to hide. Mandy climbed into it, remembering the arguments that led to Eric eventually agreeing to rent a car for her. He conceded just before he left for Afghanistan. She wiped her eyes, put on her sunglasses, and went home. A man in an old Chevrolet sedan parked nearby pressed a button on his phone. "Thanks, Bob," Eric said calmly. No, that's all. Please tell Ron that you guys have done a great job and deserve the award. Thanks again. Goodbye. Looking at his laptop, Eric sighed again. One more call, he thought, one more, and there would be no turning back. But why would he come back at all? All that's left is an unfaithful wife who ripped out his heart, and a ruined marriage that he'll never be able to put back together. Eric shook his head and took out his cell phone. He quickly dialed the number and waited. The first call, the second call, the third call, a soft click, and then silence. Eric sat emotionless, staring at the video stream on his laptop. Finally, a few minutes later, a tear rolled down his cheek. Mandy pulled the big SUV onto the highway and groaned. She hoped she could avoid the rush-hour traffic jams. She slammed her fist on the steering wheel. At this speed, she knew that her usual 30-minute trip would take more than an hour. She thought about her marriage, how unlikely it was that she could save any of it. Eric found out about her affair. Before Iraq, he could have forgiven her, but not now. The pictures were taken when he was in Afghanistan. She sobbed, realizing what he must be thinking. Although the chances were slim, she had to try to save the marriage simply because she loved him. It's a funny way to show it, isn't it? She chided herself. I cheated on him more than once, but both times he went abroad to serve his country. She shook her head quickly as if trying to ward off guilt and shame, but the tears started flowing again. Trust is not something that comes easy to Eric. His childhood was difficult. His father ran away from him and his mother when he was little, and his mother was an alcoholic. In the 5 years they had been married, Mandy had seen his mother only twice, once at their wedding and once when their son was born. It took him years to trust Mandy. When they met in college, she knew he was a soldier. She thought she accepted it. He had already served 2 years and was on his way to getting an engineering degree. They had been dating for a year before Eric proposed to her. She could still hear her father's reaction. No, Mandy, this has nothing to do with Eric, her father said. I think he will be a great husband. It's more about you. I don't think you'll make a good military wife. Don't get mad, darling, but it's damn hard to be a good husband or wife when your spouse is away for a year. Mike Lomax, Mandy's father, served in the Navy for 4 years when Mandy was little. She still remembered the quarrels her parents got into during that time. She always knew that she and her mom were having a hard time and that he didn't want this for his little girl. You were right, Dad, Mandy snorted and shook her head. You were so right. I made a terrible soldier's wife. They bought a very good starter home and Eric got a good engineering position. Life seemed so promising, and then Uncle Sam called. When Eric found out about his appointment, she mercilessly scolded him for abandoning her. To top it all off, when Eric left for Iraq, she was already 4 months pregnant. Mandy wiped her eyes as she made her way through the traffic. She remembered the loneliness she felt while continuing to live without Eric. Of course, her mom and dad did their best to help, but the sleepless nights alone ate her up. She needed Eric to hold her the whole time to hear his voice whispering that everything would be fine, but he wasn't there. She knew she was being selfish, but that didn't make the nights any less cold and lonely. Her mother moved in the last month before the baby was born, and it helped a little bit. Mandy and her mom Lisa had a very close relationship in most areas. Their personalities were so close that it seemed like they were best friends rather than mother and daughter. But there were some things her mom just didn't want to talk about. The details of her marriage while her husband was in the Navy were one of them. When Mandy tried to turn the conversation to this topic, her mother always got very upset. Eric returned home the day after Randy was born. For a moment, Mandy thought they had become a real family, but it didn't last long. He left after only 10 days and she was alone again. Her mother saw some signs and begged her not to give in to them. She constantly talked about the harm that one mistake can do to the lives of so many people. Of course, she wouldn't go into details, but Mandy suspected that her father might have been having an affair. They were always pleasant and polite to each other, even friendly, but they were never passionate. It was more like they were friends living in the same house. Mandy recalled how she struggled with depression and loneliness for several months after giving birth. Returning to work helped at first. Then she was assigned to a project with Sean Thompson. Where Eric had the rough, good-looking boy next door, Sean could have been a male model. His soft baritone voice and beautiful smile made Mandy's heart skip a beat whenever he entered the room. He carried himself with such confidence and gave such an impression. She knew that he was married to an attractive, wealthy socialite from New York. She and her children moved to the area just a couple of years ago. She even met his wife at a party once. She was beautiful, in a cosmetic sense, and her personality was perfect for one of those housewife reality shows. But that only made Sean even more exciting. Just a month after they started working together, she succumbed to temptation. "Have you given up?" She grimaced. "That's bullshit. I was flirting with him." A short 2-day business trip with the project team made it possible to turn this flirtation into a full-fledged romance. They met several more times, but she interrupted them shortly before Eric returned home. Upon his return, Eric changed. The carefree, rustic part of him seemed to have died. She knew that his trip had been difficult and that he had lost several close friends while he was there. She even remembered his call the day after the worst happened. The Hummer in front of him hid an improvised explosive device, killing 3 of his friends and injuring another. Eric took it hard. Mandy remembered letting him cry on the phone because there wasn't much she could say to comfort him. She even choked up telling him how much she loved and missed him, mostly because she really meant it, but partly because of her shame at being with Sean just 5 days ago. For the first few months after his return, she just held Eric in her arms, trying to bring him back to his former state. She had no doubt that she loved him, and her affair with Sean was just a season of weakness. Then, when everything seemed to be going so well again, the order came for his deployment to Afghanistan. She was crushed. Unsurprisingly, 2 months after his departure, she found herself back in Sean's arms. She knew there was no excuse for this, but in the end, loneliness and fear overcame the guilt. She was stalking Sean again, and it took all her charms to get him away from the succubus from the marketing department, with whom he began communicating after their affair ended. She felt her face flush with shame for what she had done. "Of course you're ashamed, but that didn't stop you, did it?" Mandy cursed herself. She tried to hold back her tears, but she couldn't, feeling self-loathing pouring out with each new tear. Sean spent several weekends at her house. He even managed to persuade her to take part in another project. For a moment, Mandy even thought about leaving Eric. Then reality set in. She, Randy, and her parents traveled to Fort Bragg, North Carolina to meet Eric when he returns for R&R. The trip there was, to put it mildly, stressful. Mandy was sure her parents suspected her, but they hadn't told her about it yet. Then she saw Eric, and all her worries disappeared. When he hugged her and kissed her, she remembered why she married him in the first place. They spent every hour reviving their marriage and strengthening their family. Mandy smiled faintly, remembering that time. Eric was so passionate, so gentle, so incredibly loving that she swore to herself at that moment that she would remain faithful to him for the rest of her life. Then Eric told her that he was not going to return to the army, that he would become a civilian 4 months after returning from Afghanistan. She openly cried, knowing that they would soon become a real family again. After returning from Fort Bragg, she broke off all relations with Sean, to his disappointment and anger. She put everything she had into preparing for Eric's return. Mandy even started going to the doctor about her fears and loneliness. She was diagnosed with clinical depression and began receiving counseling and medication. As the months passed, she felt that she was getting stronger both mentally and emotionally. Every day she swore that she would make up for it all by becoming the best wife Eric could hope for. Finally, When he returned a few months later, she fulfilled her vows. She refused him nothing, not her body, not her attention, not any part of her love. Although Kit was right, things were different when Eric returned home this time. He was more careful and didn't share his heart so freely. She just thought it was because of what happened when he was abroad. Now she began to realize that he already knew about her affair, and the thought scared her. Eric stared gloomily out the window, watching the light rain fall on those unlucky enough to get caught. He could tell that a small flare-up wouldn't last long. The sun will shine again soon. It's not going to be soon, Eric thought. It's not going to be soon. He was looking at a small dot on the laptop screen. She had been motionless for a while, but now she was finally moving. His wife's SUV was stuck in traffic, but now it was moving forward. Taking a deep breath, he looked at his watch. It's time to make a call. Depending on what is said, this could be the last time he spoke to the woman he deeply loved for the last 6 years of his life. Mandy almost twisted the steering wheel when her cell phone rang. A quick glance told her that it was him. She said a short prayer, took a deep breath, and answered. Eric? Yes, it's me, he replied. Baby, please, she said, trying to stifle her sobs. Please let me try to explain. Tell you how sorry I am. Cute? Eric? There was only silence. Honey, she said, are you still here? Yes, at the moment, he replied shortly. Honey, where are you? Are you at home with Randy? I don't have a home, Mandy, he said, and his voice only betrayed the pain for a second. You took care of that. Where are you? It doesn't matter. I'm just waiting. Me? There was hope in her voice. So how were you waiting for me, honey? Mandy couldn't hold back the sobs that stuck in her throat. She had never heard so much pain and anger in his voice before, and certainly not at her. Eric, please, I have so much to say. I screwed up so much, I know I screwed up, but I need to talk to you. I have so much to tell you. I love you, baby, just you. There was silence on the other end of the line. Okay, Mandy, tell me what you need, but I doubt it's going to make a difference. You slept with some other guy while I was gone, not just once, but many times. So what the hell do you think you can say that it's going to make any difference? Please, Eric, please for us, she pleaded through her tears. Don't leave us until I see you, please, baby. Don't throw it, he hissed. What did you do to us? No, she shouted into the phone. I know what I've done, but I've never given up on us. I was lonely and scared. I know that's not an excuse, but that's how it was. But I love you and I believe in us, honey. I really want to restore everything. Are you serious? What is it? He asked in surprise. Eric paused, wondering if she really believed what she was saying. You mean you didn't leave us when you were sleeping with him? What about the way you screamed his name when he hit you over and over again? Tell me, how the hell could you even think that it doesn't mean, damn it, to leave us? All she could do was cry as she made her way through the traffic, trying to get to him as quickly as possible. If she could only meet him face to face, then he would see the remorse she felt, and then perhaps there would be some hope. He continued bitterly. I finally got proof that my wife cheated on me while I was in Afghanistan. I think we're both lucky. I think I could have killed you and that jerk if I'd found out about it while I was in the States. After a few seconds, he sighed. Amanda, this will be our last conversation. If we are disconnected or one of us is put on standby, then there will be no other conversation. Eric, please, she begged. We can go to a psychologist. We can handle this, baby, we really can. Listen, there are a few things you need to know before you go home. First, I cleaned out all our accounts and transferred all our credit cards. I think you've been cheating on me for the last 3 years, so I'm returning the favor. He ignored her sigh. You can keep the house because I'm sure I can still smell someone else's scent in our bed. I packed everything I wanted. In the end, everything fit into only one suitcase, so the rest is yours. You can keep your SUV, although I do not know how you will pay for it, as I suspect that you will be fired tomorrow. I sent these photos to all your colleagues, family, all our friends, and even our church. In addition, I sent them and a bunch of videos to several adult websites along with all your information. I suspect you're going to be very popular soon. Oh, Eric, no, Mandy sobbed. Why? Why don't you wait until we talk? I waited, Mandy, he said calmly. I waited 4 months after I came back, but you didn't say anything. And you wouldn't have said anything if you hadn't been caught, would you, baby? What could she say? He was right. As for your little toy boy, Eric chuckled. I almost paid him a little visit. But after several meetings with his wife, I don't think it will be necessary. What a vindictive fool. You might want to give Sean a little warning. He'd better run. It seems that his wife's family has interesting connections with very dubious people. I'd be surprised if little Sean lives a year without an accident. She'll probably come after his little cheaters, too. Oh, wait, that goes for you too, doesn't it? Eric, please give me a chance to make it up to you. Mandy's cell phone beeped. Looking at it, she recognized the number. Eric, it's Mrs. Johnson calling from next door. I told you if you pass out, we're finished. His tone was menacing. Startled, Mandy replied softly, Okay, baby. I was just worried if something had happened to Randy. Randy's fine, Eric's voice softened. He's with me now and he's sleeping soundly. She breathed a sigh of relief. Speaking of Sean's wife, Victoria, he said calmly, when the two of you went on your little business trip last week. He was interrupted by the ringing of Mandy's cell phone. It was another neighbor who called. Darling, this is Mrs. Watson. Are you sure Randy's okay? Yes, Randy and I are fine, Eric said in such an eerie tone that Mandy began to panic. He chuckled. Now about Victoria Thompson. She's just something. While you and this jerk were behaving the way you should have behaved for the last 3 years, I spent 2 days getting to know his wife better. Mandy gasped in anger and pain at her husband's betrayal. Her tears started flowing again. I wish I could tell you that she's a hell of a lot better in bed than you are, but the truth is she's not, he stated. Between her whining about everything she wants and where, how, and when to do it, damn it, there's no time for pleasure. I'm sure Sean will agree. Eric, stop it, you are welcome, Mandy pleaded. Please, simply, stop. She started sobbing again. She pounded her small fists on the steering wheel, shouting obscenities at the surrounding cars as they crawled forward. She slowly regained her composure and wiped away tears of disappointment. Okay, Eric, she sniffed. You've won. You got your revenge. You broke me. She paused, waiting for his answer, but all she heard was silence. But I still love you, Eric, she said softly. There's no excuse for what I did, I know that. But all I'm asking for is a chance to make it up to you. I'm begging you, please. Please let me explain myself. There are some medical issues that you should be aware of. If you've ever loved me, please meet me. Please, baby. Medical reasons? He snorted. Postpartum depression? Clinical depression? Bipolarism? Damn it, try PTSD. In the end, it doesn't matter, does it, Mandy? You went and made love to some other guy anyway. How did I know? It really doesn't matter. As soon as I did that, I hired a few people to keep an eye on you. They did a hell of a job, too, tapping phones and installing cameras all over our house, even putting one in our bedroom. Oh, Eric, she exclaimed, do you really hate me so much that you're capable of all this? Is there really not a drop of love left? Well, it was, he replied quietly, before I watched the video of you in our bed with him. Do you remember that time, Mandy, when Randy came in? Mandy gasped. Oh my God, no, please don't do that. Eric's voice was strained as he tried to control his emotions. Imagine how I felt when I sat there and watched my 2-year-old son call another man daddy. Everything I felt for you died right when I watched you put our son to bed with both of you. Damn you, Eric's voice faltered. I guess I'm lucky I didn't know that until we went to Fort Bragg. When I saw this, I was shocked. I almost got lost there, and I was in a place where you can't afford to get lost. Eric looked at his laptop and saw that Mandy was almost home. A cruel smile twisted his handsome face as he continued in a cold tone. And as for hurting you, Amanda, I haven't even started yet. I still have a few. He heard Mandy gasp. Oh my God, she whispered. Surprises, he finished. Mandy pulled her SUV over to the side of the road and watched in horror as flames engulfed what had once been their home. As I said, Amanda, the house and everything left in it belongs to you. Mandy shook, still not believing her eyes. Damn, Eric, what did you do? That's a rhetorical question, isn't it? Eric said with a grin. I was trained to build in combat, Mandy. Doesn't it make sense? I might know something about annihilation, too. Where's Randy? She shouted. Damn it, Eric, where the hell is my son? Our son is sitting 3 feet away from me and sleeping in his car seat. So tell me, he said mockingly, can you read the message I left in our front yard? What? What a message, she murmured. Oh my God. Eric chuckled. I wasn't sure if people would be able to read it from the ground. But news helicopters, they should enjoy the words cheating fool burned into the front lawn. I wouldn't count on the sympathy of the neighbors, he continued. I put these photos up all over the neighborhood and paid several teenagers to distribute additional copies throughout the block. He stopped for a few seconds and listened to his wife's sobs. Mandy, perhaps you should think, Eric said bitterly, where you're going to sleep tonight and in the near future. I think you could sleep in your SUV until they come and pick it up. Or maybe… No, I doubt Sean will be able to help. I'm sure Victoria is already flaying him alive. I think that leaves only your parents. I wonder how your father will react to the fact that two cheaters live under his roof? What? Mandy sobbed through her sobs. Damn it, Mandy, are you really that stupid? You always told me that your father cheated on your mother when he was in the Navy. Damn it, your mother cheated on him. Mom? What is it? She asked in a trembling voice. Eric laughed cruelly. Oh, damn it, yes. Your father told me a little bit about it after I returned from Iraq. Why do you think he did it, Mandy? Do you think he suspected that his little girl was cheating on her husband just like her mom? But, unlike your father, Eric continued, I can't live with my wife for the rest of my life. Maybe he stayed for you, or maybe he still loved her. I do not know, this is his decision. Mine is to start over and hopefully find a woman I can spend the rest of my life with. I'm sure I'll find someone who can love me, be faithful, and be a good mother to Randy. Please, Eric, Mandy sobbed. I can be that kind of wife. Just give me one more chance to show you. And I'm already a good mother to Randy. I'm the only mother he needs. I suppose that's what the court has to decide, isn't it? He said calmly. Of course, the fact that I burned down our house and actually bankrupted us probably won't do me any good. Eric saw a young man in a t-shirt and baseball cap get out of a taxi and stop at the curb, looking in his direction. Eric flashed his headlights twice, and the guy walked towards him. Okay, Mandy, Eric said calmly, looking at his watch. There are a few things you still need to know, and there's not much time left, so listen very carefully. First of all, so that your bosses don't worry too much about my threats. However, Victoria is filing a similar lawsuit and is likely to win. I think the court will really like her and all the evidence I've given her. As for me, Eric cleared his throat, well, I don't like my chances in court, so I took a job abroad. I think Randy and I will really like it. No, Mandy shouted into the phone. You can't take my baby. Actually, he's my son and I can. Don't, Eric, please, she begged. He's my son too. Amanda, he said calmly. In a few years, he won't even remember you. But don't worry, I'll send you pictures of him for Christmas, and we'll even call on Mother's Day and his birthday. Since we won't know where you'll be, we'll just call your parents. Mandy cried bitterly, realizing the hopelessness of her situation. Eric sat for a while, worried and somewhat alarmed by his own actions. He knew he wasn't going to send her photos or call her. The thought of her desperately waiting for calls that would never come, and reliving this revenge for years to come was more cruel than he had thought before. Goodbye, he said coldly. I hope you rot in hell. He wiped a tear from his cheek, listening to her hysterical screams pleading for her son, and hung up the phone. Captain Black? The guy in the t-shirt standing in front of him asked. Not anymore, Eric smiled weakly. I'm just Eric Black. Well, at least for a while. The young man grinned and handed him an envelope with the numbers and passwords to the offshore bank accounts to which his funds had been transferred, minus, of course, some fees. Here are passports, photo IDs, and plane tickets for Marcus Gray and his son Michael Gray, the teenager said, smiling. Eric smiled even wider and began to put his old IDs and 2 SIM cards from cell phones into a small metal bucket. Grinning, he took a lighter and melted them into a small puddle of blackened plastic. Then he took a small hammer, smashed both phones, and threw the leftovers into a bucket. Satisfied with his work, he threw the bucket into the trash can. It was better than I could have imagined, Eric chuckled. He quickly took out the car keys and handed them to the kid. Tell Bob and Ron thanks for the rent, he said quietly. To whom? The young man asked with a big smile on his face. I'm sorry, Eric chuckled. I must have made a mistake. A few minutes later, Eric was checking his luggage at the airport. He couldn't help but smile, thinking about what awaits him and his son in the next few weeks. His contract didn't start until next month, so they were going to spend a couple of weeks on a secluded beach with a pretty lieutenant he met in Afghanistan. They were only friends then, But now that he had proof of his wife's infidelity, Eric couldn't wait to find out if there was anything else. Mr. Gray, the man at the check-in desk, politely said, "Have a wonderful flight with your son." Marcus Gray and his son walked through the lobby and started a new life.